am using this stencil from SimonSaysStamp, which is called the Winter Floral Layering Set, and it has multiple layers, and I have gone ahead and numbered each of those layers so that I know which layer comes on what. And I'm going to take this large sheet of white cardstock and I'm going to start stenciling using the stencil. I used a bigger piece so that I could cut it later, and I'm just positioning the stencil onto this cardstock. It's Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and then I'm going to take a very light gray colored ink pad from SimonSaysStamp. It's called Fog, and I'm going to ink it all up because that's going to make it easy for me for what I want to do next. And then I'm going to take the next layers and then build up this particular stamp stencil, and then when I'm all done with it, I am going to take a black microfine tip pen and I'm going to go all around the images of this particular stencil, giving it like an outline as if I'm using a stamp with a black outline. So I'm just going to go and go over every image, the leaves, the flowers, very closely. Actually, if you look at it, just that adding that little bit of faux color on that stencil itself is so pretty, and you could just stop there and use it. But here you go, I've finished adding all the black lines, and you could just use this as a card and add a sentiment to it and you are good to go. So I've trimmed it down to a little bit more comfortable size to work with, and I have now taken all the colors that I'm planning to use for coloring this particular images. So the flowers, I'm going to use all the red shades because of course it's Poinsettia, and I'm going to keep it into a very traditional color theme. So it's going to be just red and greens and maybe a little bit of gray eventually. So I'm just adding color into the darkest to the lightest. That's how I like to color. Most people like to color from lighter to darker. I like to color from darker to lighter. It really doesn't matter. Sometimes it can be a little hard to blend from darker to lighter, but I really haven't found that challenging as long as you're using really good papers. You know, really markers work beautifully. Neenah Solar White 80-pound or 110-pound, or even SimonSaysStamp 110 white cardstock, or the Copic Express It blended paper. All of those papers are really good when it comes to Copic coloring. So I'm just continuing to color the poinsettia using those colors that I kind of put in the screen. I'll also mention it below down in the description box below, so you know what colors I've used. So I'm just continuing to color them from lighter to darker, and once I'm done with this, I'm going to go with the next set of colors. So my idea for this card is to create a mosaic look, as if like to give it a mosaic feel to the card. You'll kind of see it as I go through this card eventually, and I'm adding some yellows for the centers of the card, and for the leaves I'm using some green shades. I'm just doing very basic coloring, nothing too fancy, very simple dark to light blends. You know, when you're blending the color, you want to go over that again multiple times so you get that good blend, especially when you're doing dark to lighter. And then once I'm done coloring the leaves, I took the darkest of the colors. In this case, I think it's G28, yeah, G28, and I'm just adding a little vein in the center of the leaf just to give it some extra depth and dimension. And then for the next set of leaves, I'm using another 3 shades of green. So I'm just variating a few different shades of color, green colors, just to keep the leaves a little separated from each other. So the first one was more deeper greens, and this one is more bluish green colors, not as deep as the first one. I'm doing the same thing, keeping the shadows where the shadow areas are and keeping the highlights as the highlight areas are. And as I was telling you, you need to make sure that you're blending multiple times. You're running the marker multiple times over that same color so you get some good good even blend. And then again I would do the same thing. I added some veins using the darker shade, and now I'm coloring the pine leaves. What are they called, leaves, or they just called pines? I don't know. The pine needles, I suppose. The pine leaves. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm using some olive shades of green, like deeper, really deeper green olive shade colors for the pines. Doing the same thing again. Because I have the black line, it's easy to kind of go around those images. And then for those little dots that are there in the middle, I just used some aqua shades. And then when I was done coloring, this is how it looked. And you could actually end it here and be done with it, put a sentiment, and it'll look beautiful, because it is an amazing stencil, guys. It's really, really beautiful stencil. And I want to do, as I told you, I wanted this piece to look as if it is mosaic. So I'm going to take a gray tone marker. So I'm taking the warmer gray tone markers, and I'm going to lay them in between all of those white spaces. So I'm coloring all the white spaces, making sure that there's a shadow closer to the images. So my idea is that the gray marker is acting like the grout on which these tiles, this beautiful glass tiles that eventually I'll be making, is lying. And then to give that grout some texture, I use the same gray markers that I used to color the flowers, and I started adding dots. So I added the dark warm gray. I think the warmest, sorry, not the warmest, the darkest color I used was W5, and then I went with W3, doing the same thing, laying dots all over my base, just making sure it's acting like a texture. It's like when you add grout or to your tile surface, grout is not smooth. It has texture to it. It has specks in it. It has different colors of gray if you're using a gray cap. And then I also took some white gel pen, and then I added that too. So, and obviously you can be done with it here, but I wanted to step it up. You know, I like things to be a little extra. Life has to be, life should have something a little more. So I did, I took the glossy accent and I started laying that over every image that I colored. Not the grout, but all the flowers and the leaves and the pine cones, and that just show that these are tiles. These are raised tiles or raised glass or whatever you want to call it. And then just before it started to dry, I added some gold fine, I don't know what it's called. I think it's called distress. I think it's called, I don't know, distress sparkly thing. I don't know, glitter, distress glitter. It's really fine, and I just added that inside before the glossy accent could dry, and you can see how beautiful and shiny. And now it's all done, and I have let it dry, and you can see that raised surface, which gives that beautiful glossy effect. And this is another stamp set from SimonSaysStamp. It's an older, I think it was released last year, along with this Tiny Words Christmas stamp. And I took the sentiment from there, and then I also used the tiny word, and then so I embossed love, hope and joy with gold embossing powder, and on a red strip I embossed gold Merry Christmas, and then I adhered that in the center of this background that I created. And then I took a red cardstock and mounted this entire piece on it. And when after was done, I added a few gems just to give it a little bit of extra bling bling, and then it was all done. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you will get to use the stencil from SimonSaysStamp, and I'll see you next time.